And welcome back to another episode of the Mars Magazine podcast. My name is Adario Strange, and this week we have with us Howard Wu from Aleo and, well, Aleo. I'm saying it wrong already. Aleo, like paleo. You already taught me before we started. Aleo and Provable from the crypto world. Howard, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And how are you doing, Adario?
Awesome, awesome. I love that name for some reason. Maybe I'm an old Howard Stern fan, but just Howard always seems like a solid name. Uh, by the way, where are you like born, raised? What's your background? People, because we have a lot of people on, and they often kind of characterize themselves based on the school they went to. But like, I want to go deeper. Like, what's the granular,
I'm
origin story?
so I grew up in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. I've been in San Francisco my whole life. I'm here today also for this recording, and I think just growing up my whole life, I've always been into computers as a kid. I used to have this eBay store where I'd sell custom built PCs, and I used to read a lot of tech blogs. And actually, that was also how I got into crypto. Was I heard about this internet money back in like 2010, 2011 when I was a kid in high school, and was just really fascinated by this whole concept.
Okay. And so you said you grew up, but were you born here? Like,
Born
are
here.
you an immigrant from abroad? Like, what's that story?
Nah, so my parents came to the U.S. In the 80s, and I've been born here. Grew up literally born in the Bay Area, and then grew up here my whole life. Went to school here, got my first job in the Bay Area. Always been in the Bay Area.
And where did they come from?
They came from China.
China. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you visit, do you keep an eye on what's happening in crypto in China? Because I remember, I think we talked about this earlier.
Yeah.
I just, I've been so focused on AI, I'm kind of like re-engaging crypto again in terms of like what the latest is. But I remember the last time I was paying close attention, China was kind of like really clamping down on at least non-government coins like crypto and other coins. Like you know,
Yeah.
what
I I think like China's whole position has been pretty tight on crypto. And it's been a bit ironic because China's own policies, from my point of view in the West, is what actually spurred the rest of Asia to be so all in on crypto. A lot of folks who were running exchanges or running mining operations in China at the time, when the government started to crack down, ended up moving outside to like Singapore or over into Korea or into Vietnam, Southeast Asia, broadly speaking. And I feel like that actually started to create its own flywheel effect for the rest of Asia, to have a much larger crypto presence. And I think today, many people know that Asia is a huge market for the crypto retail audience.
Yeah, and for those watching and listening, I'm not just asking because he's Asian. I lived in Asia, so I remain obsessed. I lived in Japan, and I always have one eye on Asia. So I always want to. And one thing that struck me when I lived in Japan is that the West doesn't really pay attention to what's happening in Asia, and what's happening in Asia is so consequential. And so whenever I, come across someone who has any kind of even tangential connection to Asia, I want to know, like, do you know what's going on? Like, what's the latest?
Yeah.
But you're
Well,
a Bay Area guy, so let's talk about the Bay.
let's talk about
You,
the
I mean, you're doing, what is it? It's DeFi, right? Is that the correct term? DeFi?
Yeah, so we're building a privacy layer for crypto. We built this blockchain called Aleo. It's a layer one blockchain. It provides private applications that offer compliance as well. And really, the goal for us is to enable what we think are the key blockers that are holding crypto back from reaching mainstream audiences. And so for us, like we're really thinking about how would you really use crypto in the real world? How can I get someone like my mother who doesn't use crypto to join in and also use these types of rails? That's something that has been a huge challenge in the entire crypto industry for the past decade. And we think that we finally come around to solving some of those core issues.
So okay, so I want to get to the product, but I still want to get. I'm still staying on culture.
Yeah,
So you're in the Bay right now. Now I think you told me earlier you also have a presence in New York, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
now, as the AI boom is happening in San Francisco, do you find it difficult to get anyone to listen to you above the AI noise while you're trying to kind of like promote, and kind of get people into your like here in New York, because of organizations like Gemini, and because we have Wall Street here, I think it's a lot easier to like, be heard here when you're talking
Yeah.
about crypto and DeFi. But in the Bay, like is it difficult being heard above the AI noise?
Giving a very candid answer, I think so. Before COVID, crypto was really hot in the Bay Area, especially in San Francisco. There were all sorts of meetups. I would go to Bitcoin meetups, Ethereum meetups, developer meetups, you name it. I think after COVID, a lot of people moved from San Francisco over to New York. And that's also why we have a presence in New York. When it comes to Wall Street and generally kind of financial institutions that are now waking up and thinking more seriously about crypto, the name of the game is really in New York there. And I'd say the other area that has in the past year really taken off is DC. There was just DC FinTech Week about a week and a half ago from today. And, we had a lot of presence out there as well. Policymakers, regulators, they're all getting very interested in how to think about, regulating the markets, how to introduce policies that are pro-business, that really help to grow the crypto economy. So we spend a lot of time out there as well.
What do you think? Like, just I meant to get into this like later. Actually, you know what? I've got like a big AI versus crypto question
Sure,
later, but
sure.
let's unpack things first. So, what you're working on are two things. Now, from my understanding, it's the blockchain Aleo, and then you kind of have like a developer platform called Provable to
Yeah,
work on that blockchain. Is that correct?
that's correct.
So
The
now, what I wanted to ask you is the thing that's not completely clear to me is that it seems like Aleo is privacy centric. And I know you guys just did a deal with Paxos. Is that correct?
That is
S-
correct.
Okay, so but it seems like that deal is kind of based on or targeting enterprise and large institutions. And or just earlier, you said you wanted to kind of get like normal people into kind of like using crypto. So what's the disconnect that I have? Because I kind of had the impression that you guys were like full throttle, big institutional, but you're saying you're also trying to get like normal people
So
involved.
the reality is that to integrate privacy tech, especially on crypto rails, you need to go B to B to C. And the reason for that is that a lot of the technical parts of crypto are really unapproachable for the average person. I think we see that with existing blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And the thesis that we have is that stablecoins and payments are a very instrumental part to bringing crypto to mainstream audiences. So in order to do that, we want to get plugged into all of the major apps, all the major fintech solutions that are out there, so that we become the rails, the settlement layer behind the scenes for all the users and consumers that are out there. And so, if you open up Revolut today, you can now pay with Aleo. That's a feature that's been integrated. We launched the chain with Coinbase, which has the Coinbase app for all users as well. And the idea really is to unlock these types of privacy capabilities for people via these types of enterprises and institutions.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned. So your organization, Aleo and Paxos, just launched a stable coin called
That's correct.
USAD. Um, and I guess from a broad perspective, you're competing with USDC, USDT in the stable coin world, but your coin is unique in that your stable coin is unique in that it's focused on privacy. And I wanted to kind of get into that because one of the strengths that people talk about when they talk about crypto and particularly stable coins is transparency.
Right.
And so I kind of dug into what USAD is about. And I think I have a general understanding is that I guess, verification happens on either end. And the middle, I guess, portion, kind of the transit is what's kind of obscured. And the compliance, I guess, happens upon request. Is that, in terms of authorities wanting to kind of check things, is that how it works?
Yeah, so really to dive into USAD, the real thesis really comes from the user journey of money. When you look at how stablecoins work today, the problem is that everyone sees everything. And this is a problem because imagine if you were to sign into your bank account and your parents, your best friends, like everyone that you know can just see your balance, how much money you make, how much you spend, where you spend it, how frequently. This is all information that is considered sensitive, right? And so if you really want to use crypto rails for day-to-day payments, you actually need to introduce some level of privacy that gets you banking level privacy and compliance. And that's something that has been missing in the market today. And there's many use cases for private stablecoins that we've heard a lot of feedback about that's missing. And that's why we ended up building USAD. We wanted to put this out there so that there's an opportunity to actually showcase some of these new use cases.
So why hasn't anyone done this before? I mean, we've been looking at stable coins for a long time. I understand that there are, I guess, more challenges, but why is this just now kind of like from, I think one of your, you kind of put out an announcement and one of the, I guess, statements was that you were the first privacy stable coin or privacy focused stable coin. Why is that? Like, why hasn't this happened before?
Absolutely. The reality is that the technology hasn't been there. It's only in the last few years that the tech to enable privacy on blockchains has become performant enough and practical enough for real world day to day use. To give you an analogy, 10 years ago, there were blockchains that were trying to introduce privacy, and to do a single transfer, a single payment, it would take about 3 minutes on a MacBook to basically generate that transaction. Today, that exact same transaction can now be processed in 3 seconds on an iPhone. And so, that latency, that time delay is something that is impractical if you're trying to do consumer payments, right? And it's only in the last few years that from the research side of things, the technology has gotten good enough that we can actually integrate this into real world tech.
So do you, yeah, I don't want to get too uh in the weeds on this, but do you see a privacy challenge coming from the, like we just had on the co-founder of Circle?
Yeah,
Do you see like
Shard.
a challenge from USDC coming? Or well, let me, before we go there, let me ask you something. I remember privacy coins, Monero, Zcash, and I just remember the stigma and the
Yeah.
fear around those coins, and just if you even use those coins, people thought, oh, you're doing something, you're buying something evil from the dark web. What are you up to? Let's check into. So how do you get away from that stigma? Even though you're, I think Coinbase is one of your investors. I think A16Z. I mean, you have big investors, so you have kind of some sort of institutional backing and credibility, involved. But still, there's that old stigma of privacy coins from before. Like, how do you get around that?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing to really call out is that any new technology has good actors and bad actors. So, like if we go back 20 years ago and look at the early internet itself, you had Napster and you had Spotify. Both said we're going to offer software that lets people download music and listen to it, right? But one said I'm going to offer a piece of software that circumvents the system, whereas the other said I'm going to offer a piece of software that integrates with artists and music labels and charge people a nominal fee for it. And I think it's very clear which got shut down and which created billions of dollars of value for artists everywhere. And so, the same comes here as well, where you have this new privacy technology coming into crypto. And early on, some people said, yeah, maybe we could use this to get around the governments and really circumvent the system. And I think we've seen how that has played out. Whereas the approach that we're taking is really saying, let's go compliance first. Let's introduce privacy with compliance, integrate with the institutions themselves, and provide this type of rails for their backends. And I think that, I certainly am a believer that this is the direction that actually needs to come about if we want to see this technology manifest in the real world.
Okay, so now back to the question I was about to ask a second ago, which is your moat. What is your moat against a Tether or a USDC, uh, aggressively entering the privacy stablecoin space? I mean, how do you protect what you're doing? I mean,
It's a good question. So first off, the approach we're taking is not opposed to any existing stablecoin issuer, and that's why we're working with folks like Paxos, for example. The goal is to work with them to introduce this level of privacy to existing stablecoins and to new stablecoins. The key thing is that these existing companies don't have the ability to introduce the privacy tech that we've built out, mainly because it's been such a novel breakthrough. The number of researchers and cryptographers and engineers in the world who understand this type of technology is very, very limited. And so that's why we see ourselves as a platform to enabling all of them, including like the circles and the tethers of the world, to use this so that they can make USDC or USDT private as well. Long term, the goal really is to enable payment rails, payment networks, anywhere that day-to-day commerce happens, to offer some level of protection for the end user and for the businesses at play.
do you envision? I mean, I know that was a great answer, And I know you want to work with, people who are already in the stablecoin space, but is anyone on the horizon that seems like a challenger? I mean, I'm sure you're confident, so you have no problem mentioning who might be, on your heels. Is anyone else in the space, or you have it all to yourself
Absolutely.
right now?
No, absolutely. Well, at least today, in terms of L1s that are using this tech to offer private stablecoins and private payments, we are the only ones on the market right now. There are many teams that are also building for this exact same vision, and they're 6 to 24 months away from doing so. So I think the key thing to call out is that we're the first to market. If you want to integrate and launch private stablecoins, we're the only solution right now on the market. And because of that, we've been engaging with all these financial institutions that have taken a lot of interest in what we've built, because this is the first time they can actually pilot such a use case.
So now take me from A to Z on, let's say, I am bank A, and whatever large corporation B is in Singapore somewhere.
Sure.
And bank A, uses USAD to send 5 million bucks for some project.
Yeah.
Walk me through, like, how, like, who sees what, how does that work? Like, I mean, you don't have to get like super granular, but just give us kind of like a general kind of Rube Goldberg of how that works.
Yeah. So first off, the key thing is that every transfer that you make has to be compliant. And so what that means is that you need to demonstrate that you're not on a sanctions list, that you're not on some form of a freeze list. And we use a type of tech called Merkle trees to basically prove in the transaction itself that you are not on one of these lists. And by doing that, then it enables you to then send the payments. From there, it really comes down to the institution or the bank and what their requirements are. Many, for example, have to abide by certain travel rules or by certain limits. And from there, the software allows you to then further demonstrate or comply with those rules. We've been working with teams like Predicate and also with orgs like the Crypto ISAC to enable compliance engines and policy rules engines so that you as the issuer or as the bank can further introduce additional sets of gatekeeping or guards on it. So if I want to send a payment from here to somewhere else in the world, maybe I need to have it be authorized by an escrow agent, and the escrow agent needs to then sign off on that. Or maybe it needs to go through a risk analysis, in which case there are trusted third parties that can effectively vet that to make sure that it's good to go. It really comes down to the provider, and basically the key thing is that the blockchain we've built allows for this type of facilitation, something that wasn't available in privacy blockchains 10 years ago and these privacy coins previously.
Now, um, I, in the literature, kind of with the announcement for USAD, it was again framed as kind of enterprise and large institutions. Does that mean like small businesses? Is there some sort of prohibitive, like, is there some, I'm completely, I haven't been in the stable coin space for a long time, definitely not the privacy coin space for a while. Is there something prohibitive with dealing with Paxos in terms of cost or infrastructure? Like, can a small business person with 3 employees, use USAD to conduct transactions back and forth? Or is that kind of like not even feasible because that's just too small?
Yeah, well, the beauty about having a blockchain and having an ecosystem that is decentralized and permissionless is that any type of business can participate in a network like this. So whether they're big or small, it really doesn't make a difference. The reality is that we want to allow anyone who has a clear business need to transact with privacy to come onto these rails and participate. That opens the doors to all types of end user journeys, whether it be for things like point of sale terminals or for offering things like payroll. Every business has their own types of requirements, and we've started from what we know are folks that understand the mission and the vision of what we're doing, and trying to work with them to bring this to light. And the idea with that is to have some clear examples that allow for others to look at it and say, this is a solution that we can use in our business, and this is how we would do it. And working with partners like Paxos or Revolut, they're wonderful partners because they already understand the challenges that we're talking about from the Web 2 fintech lens. They've seen it in traditional payment systems, and now it's about translating and migrating that into Web 3 payment systems.
And just, I guess, a really simplistic question. Let's say I know if I'm a company trying to send, I don't know, $100,000 from, point A to, again, Singapore, that wire can take a bit of time to
Yes.
get to them. What's is there a speed factor involved here? Like, is it significantly faster? And is it faster than just using some other crypto that isn't privacy based, I guess?
That's a great question. So I would say first off, it is faster, it is cheaper, and it is more private than existing payment solutions like wire transfers, ACH, Swift that you've used. Transactions can clear in under 10 seconds. They can offer full end-to-end privacy for the sender and the recipient. And the goal here is really to allow for anyone, big or small, to send that payment unencumbered. So what do I mean by that? Well, recently I actually had to send a wire transfer from the US to Europe, and I had to send it in a foreign currency. When I issued that from my bank, the problem was the banker called me to confirm the amounts that I was sending and the details. It got stopped over by the fraud team. I had to then send some emails to confirm in writing the details that this was correct. That was a whole 3-day turnaround. And then by the time it actually reached Europe, then it took another 2 days for it to clear. And by the time it cleared, because it was in a foreign currency, the forex rate had changed so much that I had to send an additional wire just to cover the delta there. And so, that type of frustration is something that I still face to this day. And it's certainly been a very strong point of motivation for me when it comes to creating a solution like Aleo. The real goal is to allow for private stablecoins and private payments to move through any type of cross-border system unencumbered. And I think that this has been a very good example of what's possible when you consider Web3 as your backing solution.
Yeah, I've been through that a lot. Oh my God, sending money internationally is a nightmare, and that the change in rates, exchange rates, that's huge. People don't think about that. The time kills you. We kind of blew past some of your early background. I want to kind of rewind a bit.
Sure, sure.
Um, your kind of professional history in Silicon Valley. If I understand, you were at Meta and Google
Yeah.
separately at different times in your career. Just give me a sense of what that taught you from I guess the culture of tech business. What did you learn? What do you think? You know, uh, right now it doesn't have like the greatest reputation, meaning big tech, working at big tech. I remember, Google used to be this coveted, job for a lot of people. Now it's kind of, I don't know, it's almost the opposite. You're seeing these AI hiring wars between Meta and OpenAI and several other companies.
Yeah.
And I think maybe a month or so ago, a large cohort of their hires like left, and there's just it's weird right now. And I have, from my own experiences, a sense of what's happening there. But like, and I know your experience is a good bit a while ago, but I'm just curious, like what imparts some of your wisdom, your experience about working in Silicon Valley at those kind of big tech firms.
Sure. Well, during my time at Google, I worked on search. It was a really interesting experience because we were working on these massively distributed systems. And so you really got to see how you serve 2 billion people. How do you introduce a service that is highly reliable, with high availability, and just there in a very fast response time? That was something that was critical. You could not let it go down. So it was a very interesting experience from that. But one of the key things that I found was, I kept looking for opportunities to pursue some type of a crypto project internally. And at the time, it was really difficult because crypto, as you called out, was not the kind of poster child for tech at the time. And so, it was really hard to get VPs on board. It was very hard to get budget and headcount for efforts like that. And there were actually a lot of small projects inside of Google, namely in this area called Area 120, where people were trialing ideas of saying, well, maybe what if we added Bitcoin into Google Pay, or what if we tried introducing Ethereum into the computing framework that Google Cloud is. And there are all sorts of these ideas at the time, and it really wasn't until Facebook started pursuing Libra that I felt tech started to get serious about it. And so I was brought in to Libra specifically to provide advice and consultation around privacy. Privacy was becoming a very hot topic because Libra was trying to build payment rails on traditional tech rails. And as you can imagine, there were all sorts of questions at the time about how do you comply with KYC AML? How do you comply with GDPR? What is the retention policy, the data policies? How do you authorize? How do you mint and issue coins? These sorts of questions were really unsolved because the tech at the time was less than 10 years old. Everyone was still figuring out what a blockchain was. Even internally, there's so many discussions at Meta about how do you create a blockchain that is faster and more scalable than Bitcoin. For the audience, Bitcoin produces a block on average every 10 minutes and can pack maybe a few thousand transactions. And obviously, for a company that's serving billions of users, that's a no-go. You need something that's far bigger, far faster, and far cheaper than what the status quo was. And so, there was a lot of questions around how do we design that, and that was what I spent a lot of my time thinking about. And I think through that, it was really a formative experience that led me to understand, these are some of the real problems that you're going to face if you're trying to bring crypto into the real world. And it certainly led to a lot of the thinking that I had in building Aleo.
I didn't know you worked on Libra. This is fascinating. I'm so excited because I spent a lot of time investigating Libra. Um, so two questions. I'm so like, oh, I have someone from Libra. First of all, I remember we were kind of like making jokes that I'm sure you know the history of the
Yeah.
Winklevoss twins with Facebook and Zuckerberg. And the joke was that Gemini, their crypto startup, uh, that he named it Libra as kind of like he was trolling them. Is there any? Did you get any sense that that might sort of be true? I mean, maybe he said it in an interview since then. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that at the time there were a lot of discussions about what to call the project, and there were a lot of people that were working on the naming for it. I remember there was also a lot of rumors from like Wall Street Journal or from like New York Times speculating what it would be called and also what the system would do. From what I could gather, the team that was really building out Libra was really heads down, focused around payments and really working to build a system that could actually scale for the real world. And so, the naming or the lore of it, it's less clear for me, candidly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. That's fair. So then my next question, and maybe this is just going to show how, out of the loop I am. My memory is that it kind of faded away. So I'm going to ask you, what happened to Libra? Because it was like a big grand plan at the time. I mean, they created like a big promotional video for Libra. There was this big website.
yeah.
Zuckerberg talked about Libra a lot. Like, did it fade away? And if so, what happened?
I think it faded away. And look, it was a really cool project. Certainly, it was the people that were brought together were a very unique set of people. There's about 150 folks that were working on the project, and I felt very privileged to be one of them. I think the challenges really came from the ethos or the philosophy, the strategy of building out Libra. Speaking for myself here, the sense that I got was Silicon Valley historically has always been about move fast, break things. And this was one of the few times where it was actually about move slow and ask for permission. And I think that's how it kind of died on the hill there. People were really trying to figure out how do we get regulatory approvals, how do we get the right folks to sign off on it, getting green lights from all the various organizations and jurisdictions for this thing to launch. And it was frankly the right idea at the wrong time. And because of that, you ended up with a lot of stagnation, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of hesitation. And you also have the whole Facebook narrative at the time where people were not a big fan of Facebook. I think there's still some of that even lingering today, which, painted it from a political standpoint into something that was really difficult to get off the ground. So ultimately, I think those were, it was kind of like death by a thousand paper cuts type of a thing. Not one single thing ended the project, but I think the culmination of everything created enough inertia that ultimately, even with pivots and rebrands, it didn't have the ability to take off.
Yeah, I so agree with you. Just dumb question, but I have to ask: why aren't more crypto firms based in no state tax states? It seems like that would be kind of, and I guess you could ask the same thing about stockbrokers and everything, and you want that kind of hive of activity and serendipitous, but I mean for crypto. I'm just curious. Like, is there a simple answer that I'm just kind of missing on that?
I think it really comes down to where the center of money is. And like, a lot of crypto teams are in New York, for example, because, New York is the center of finance. And, Wall Street has historically been there. And I think everyone is trying to get Wall Street on board. And so, naturally you end up in high state or high tax states like New York, because you want to be at the epicenter. And that is kind of the premium that you're paying there. Nonetheless, I do think that, states like Wyoming, where they have passed a lot of pro crypto legislation. They've been supportive of structures like the Duna, are very beneficial for crypto founders and entrepreneurs. And there's been a lot of, I know, like mining companies who are set up in the Midwest to take advantage of cheaper electricity rates out there. So it really comes down to the pockets of crypto that you're talking about. But I think when it comes to thinking about financial,
Question, and this is something I ask, you know, AI folks, crypto folks, but I'm particularly interested with regard to crypto, and that's quantum. Now, I know that it's kind of like a murky area for many people, and some people are bullish, thinking that developments are happening rapidly. Others are, no, we're pretty far out for any, from any significant developments or breakthroughs. But do you think, you know, are, are you in the back of your mind watching the developments in quantum computing and thinking, in terms of like cracking cryptography and, just being this kind of hammer? Like,
yeah.
is that in the back of your mind somewhere?
Absolutely. My background is in cryptography. That's what I studied. And I would say that from my vantage point, especially being in crypto, what I see is that we will all need to update our systems and upgrade our systems for quantum computing. The timeline that I see is, call it 10 years from now. 2035 is around that ballpark where the quantum computing conversation becomes very top of mind or very topical for us. When you look at Bitcoin, there are plenty of wallets that are owned by Satoshi themselves that have a lot of value just stored in there right now. And because those public keys are known, one can reverse engineer those if they did have quantum computers. Now, I will also caveat this by saying that if this were possible, I also think the existing banking rails that we know it are going to be in a much worse situation because it's using much older tech that has much higher risks and frankly is underpinning our global financial system. And so, it won't be one of those cases where, it's like a flip of the switch, like kind of a Y2K type of concern. I think it's going to be incremental where people are going to get slightly better and then slightly better and then a little bit better at cracking some of these keys. And so those will be almost like the canaries in the coal mine. But certainly if you look at Bitcoin, it would be a phenomenal canary in the coal mine that if one of those wallets started to move unbeknownst to people, that would be a clear indicator that someone, whether it be a company or a nation state, has developed a quantum computer that can actually crack real world addresses and real world accounts, at which point it would be like the true canary for everyone to upgrade and change their systems.
I have to ask, you mentioned it, Bitcoin, you mentioned 2035. Price prediction, sir.
I think Bitcoin
2035.
I think Bitcoin is going to $1,000,000. That's my
By
belief.
2035.
By 2035.
Oh, may the gods bestow upon you correctness and insight. um, and again, I know we're about done, but just real quick, you brought up Y2K. I don't often talk to people who have like a clear memory of Y2K, so I'm fascinated by you even mentioning it. Um, I know you're not in the AI space, but we mostly usually talk about AI here, so I'm sure you're conversant to some degree. And I'm just wondering, like, when Y2K was upon us, there were a few glitches and some upgrades had to happen, but generally there wasn't a big catastrophe. But there was like a big,
Yeah.
for years concern. Do you think we're kind of going through the same thing with this AGI slash super intelligence talk? Because a lot of people that I've had on the pod who are like either engineers or founders of very big companies, AI companies, some of them say, no, this is just a tool. It's not, I don't see it ever being self aware. And this is all science fiction. Like, where do you stand on that?
I think AI itself today is still incredibly nascent. And I do think that the AGI narrative is a little bit too early. I do think that the weaponization of this idea of AGI, though, is what may cause our own demise. And what I mean by that is that, you know, it's almost like the Y2K hysteria where everyone got up in arms about the fact that it might be happening. That I think that you may see, for example, like the US and China get into a circumstance where they're actually arguing with each other or fighting each other, almost like a Cold War, to get a man onto the moon. Like there will be, it's the threat, the imminent threat that AGI is possible, but not so much the fact that AGI is actually going to be possible that will cause us to enter into some sort of a potential global Armageddon, so to speak. I feel like that is a potential outcome, but I don't think that AGI itself is around the corner. I think it's still many, many, many years away. But certainly, I can't say that I'm an AI expert on this front. But I can say that from what I've seen, when I plug in a picture and says count how many digits there are, AI still fails to do that. So I do think that we're still a long ways away from that.
Well, I mean, it's getting better, but I agree with you that I'm a lot more worried about the human element in
Yeah.
conjunction with AI. And that scenario you painted, I think, is dead on. This idea that, kind of like the space race to get to a particular point, using up all this energy, all these resources, fighting for the chips. I'm sure there's going to be a chip war. There's even a book called Chip War. I don't know if you read it, but a literal chip war happening. Yeah, that's kind of more what I'm worried about. Although I also think about the idea that what if superintelligence is possible? What if a machine, or AI could become self-aware? Aren't we essentially talking about enslaving an entity? Because if you put guardrails on it, and if you hopefully have control over it, because we want to control these things, aren't you essentially inventing a new kind of slave? And it's
Yeah.
like, at that point, it's kind of like, okay, is it human? Does it like a dog, a monkey, a cat,
Yeah.
can we abuse it? No, you go to jail if you abuse your pet. If you house it in a cage that's too small for it, if you mistreat it in any
Right.
way. But at the same time, we can slaughter pigs and birds, no problem. So there's this weird sliding scale. Um, and when I look forward, because I'm a big science fiction person, I love her. And when I think, if we were able to create a self-aware AI that we had some control over, that I mean, does it deserve freedom? Does it deserve to live its own life? Can't so those are existential questions that hopefully we won't in our lifetime have to think about.
You
Last
raise
thing.
you
No, go
you
ahead.
raise
Sorry.
No, it's all good. You raise an interesting point there with AI because, when I look at the kind of key areas of tech that are being developed right now, you have AI and you have crypto. And AI is really about generating, surplus. It's this idea that you can, information has become cheap. Anyone can create knowledge and information, and there's a wealth of it. Whereas crypto is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, trying to create a form of scarcity, right? There's only 21 million Bitcoins. There's, it's this idea that the system has integrity to it, and I wouldn't be surprised if, fast forwarding 50 years from now, that AI uses crypto as a form of governance or as the tool to control humanity in a sense. That, today, humans are using blockchains as a form of governance. We use smart contracts, we encode the rules in there, people follow those rules, the protocol, then it gives you rewards. I wouldn't be surprised if AI came in, used these exact rails to create a societal order or societal structure that actually allowed for incentives to play into human behavior. And I think that that would be the way that AI kind of takes over if we were to look at that scenario. It's a very these are two pieces of tech that are very symbiotic with each other. They're at
Well,
polar ends of the spectrum, but they're very, very cohesive.
I love that. I love that the way you frame that, because I agree. It's like the fungible and the non-fungible. The fungible being AI hallucinates. You don't know if what you're getting is just a badly copied, or Xeroxed, you know, thread of some information that it pulled from somewhere, and it's trying to convince you that it's right. And then if you this is the thing about AI, you have to interrogate it on an area that you're a category expert on. Because once you do that, you quickly see, oh, this thing really doesn't know what it's doing. And it only seems like it really knows what it's doing when you attack it or question it, interrogate it on an area you're not super conversant in. Because when I interrogate it on areas I know well, I very quickly I'll say, well, what about that? You didn't say that part. Oh, you're absolutely right. You're brilliant for bringing that up. Yes, I meant to include that in here. And it's like, well, it's almost like a liar. I don't know, but with crypto, it's non fungible, or
Right.
you know, you know, in an ideal scenario, it's non fungible, and it's all about this is it. This is what it is. There is no denying. There's no half truth. There's no is this asset there? Is it not there? It's 100%. It's either there or not. And so yeah, I think it could be symbiotic, and that's why I'm really fascinated by the prediction markets we were talking about earlier, because I feel like it's this other version of mixing, you know, the fungible with the non-fungible,
Yeah.
in an interesting way. Um, I know we didn't get too much into provable, but can you just again just reassert what provable is about with regard to Aleo and just what you're doing in general?
Yeah, so Provable is the labs company for Aleo. The goal is really to build a full stack solution that allows for developers to plug into the Aleo blockchain. We're building things like wallets, explorers, SDKs, APIs. It is the backbone that has allowed for a lot of these partnerships that we've been talking about on this interview, to be able to plug into the Aleo ecosystem. Naturally, one of the key things with building pioneering tech is that it can be very difficult to use. And so, our job, certainly as engineers, as researchers, as cryptographers, is to take this complicated idea and bring it to the forefront with APIs and interfaces that are intuitive for people to use. And so by doing so, we think that this is going to be how we're actually going to bring stablecoins and payments and all of the interesting things of crypto, to the rest of the world.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Howard, I appreciate your time. Can you like tell us like your addresses, like
Absolutely.
social, your websites, like where people can reach you?
Absolutely. If you want to learn more about Aleo, check out aleo.org. I'm also on X. My handle is one Howard Wu. And we also have a Discord if you want to join. It's aleo.org/Discord, where we host bi-weekly community calls, monthly updates, and frankly, the entire community's on there just chattering away. So feel free to join on any of those fronts.
And provables at provable.com, right?
Provable is at provable.com.
Well, Howard, again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And you can check out more of what we're doing at marsmag.com, where we have old episodes of some of the top people in not just crypto, but also AI. And also check out our newsletter, which is marsmag.substack.com, where we get into some of, I guess, the intersection of entertainment and AI and kind of future tech. So, again, thanks again, Howard, for joining us. I appreciate it. And you've given us a lot to think about.
Adario, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
And we will see you guys next time.